Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of The Little Prince, which was shown at the Sinistar movie theaters in Potsdamer Platz. This animated film was based off of the classic 1943 novel of the same name, known in French as Le Petit Prince, written by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It was directed by Mark Osborne, was produced by Dimitri Rassam, alongside Aton Somarche and Alexis Vonal. It was written by Irena Brignol and Bob Perischetti. It was edited by Carol Kravets Aidanian and Matt Landon. It was shot by Chris Kapp and Adele Abada, with music by Richard Harvey and Hans Zimmer alongside French vocalist Camille. And it stars the vocal talents of Jeff Bridges, Mackenzie Foy, Rachel McAdams, Paul Rudd, Marion Cotillard, James Franco, Benicio del Toro, Ricky Gervais, Albert Brooks, and Bud Cort. Now, I have read this novel when I was a very young boy, when my father introduced this novel to me, saying that this was a very important novel for me, as it tells a tale about growing up and how people see the world around them, and a lot of other deep and meaningful subjects touched in this novel in particular. At first, I wasn't too interested given the fact that I was only 11 years old, but as time went forward and marched on, I actually found myself actually really liking it a lot more and feeling a lot more invested and quite interested with what this world of the Little Prince had to offer. And I was totally intrigued. It really talks about growing up, loss, and how kids perceive adults, how adults perceive kids, and many other things and many other topics as well. Not to mention, this novel is almost like a semi-autobiographical tale based from the author's journey to the Sahara Desert after his plane crashed. And even parts of the novel, like the rose being reminiscent of his lover, and even the little prince himself, reminiscent of how he was as a very young boy. So there are a lot of elements about this classic novel that a lot of people can really, really root for and really find and really, really let their hearts go out for, which makes this novel all the more interesting and all the more iconic. In fact, well, by the time I graduated high school 4 years ago, I was even awarded this award for best behavior known as the Little Prince Award, and I was even rewarded the novel itself as my graduation present, which made my high school graduation even more exciting and even very much pleasant, as it was very much a memory I could really relive and something I really felt grateful for. And The Little Prince has seen a lot of adaptations, from TV shows to movies to animation adaptations, and not just this one, and most notably from the 1978 anime, The Adventures of the Little Prince, and even an opera version in which the Little Prince is sung by a boy soprano, the Rose is sung by a a coloratura soprano, and the Fox was the one that's sung by a mezzo. And I even have the DVD of this opera, and I actually found it really colorful, and the singers really did a fine job with their respective roles, and I definitely enjoyed it. And 2015, I will really have to say, this was a really great year for films so far. We have seen the release of, and even the surge of, such films like The Martian, Steve Jobs, and even the new Star Wars film. And even with the animation film side, we have seen the surge of films like Inside Out and the Peanuts movie, really attracting a lot of viewers and attracting a lot of film fans, and even having really huge fan bases. So you could really tell that this is really starting to be a very excellent year for films so far. So with this film in particular, it also has a very interesting history because this was at first screened at the Cannes Film Festival about 7 months ago, and then after its screening at the Cannes Film Festival, it was then released 2 months later to a lot of French theaters, and then it's also been released throughout Europe and parts of Canada and many, many others, except it's going to make its official US debut on March 2016, which I'm sure a lot of people who haven't heard of this film but have seen the trailers are totally excited. And I have seen the trailers of this film, and at first, I wasn't really so sure of what to make of it. It looked really, really promising, and it looked really great, and it really captured my attention. And after I watched the film, I really have to say that it exceeded my attention. So let's really find out of what really made this film really great in its own way, starting with the story. Now, for those of you who are expecting a straight-up adaptation of The Little Prince, I'm sorry to say this, but you're only going to find this in segments throughout the film. Mostly, the film dedicates its time to showing a young girl alongside with her mother. Now, the film starts off like this. The mother and the young girl go to this prestigious school called the Worth Academy, where the young girl has an interview. She seems to do very well, but when the teachers ask her what does she want to be when she grows up, she apparently freaks out, faints on stage, and then this causes the mom to really be totally concerned for her own daughter and really give her a rigorous lesson plan that she must complete throughout her summer break. Now, at first she seems to be focused with it until a mysterious old man living next door has his propeller crashing in their house, and at first the little girl is rather weirded out by him, especially the mother. But she's able to find out that there were some things about the old man that she has never seen before and has never really realized before. And I'm not going to spoil anything from here because, well, I have to really live by the no spoilers policy. But it's very easy to say that the story throughout this film is just very well done, and it really intersperses with the story of the young girl and her mother and the old aviator alongside the story of the little prince really well. And at times you really feel like these two universes really do collaborate to make something really great and to really juxtapose off of each other really, really well. So you could really tell that this story in both the little girl's world and the world of the little prince was just so well done, and how they connect with each other is really quite cohesive, and you really have a sense of how it feels just to grow up and just to really see the world around you and to constantly wonder what happens next and all that stuff. It leaves you just glued to the screen every single time, really seeing these characters of what they go through and really rooting for them from beginning to end. And everything about this story was just so well woven, so well done, and at times there were moments in which I was almost about to be teary-eyed. Oh yes, there were some tear-jerking moments here and there for good measure, and there were also some lighthearted moments here and there thrown for good measure. But more than anything, as an animated film, it really does a very great job in just making animation accessible to a wide range of audiences and not just for kids. Because I'm sure that a lot of us will say that those who think that animation is just for kids are just really much missing the point of what animation can do for a wide demographic. And with this, it really executes itself very well with a story that is very powerful, yet wrapped up in a very simple package. And it really doesn't need to explain too much, nor does it need to explain too little. it's honest in its execution. It is deep and meaningful, and it's definitely a great trip from beginning to end. The animation is just very much well done. It's totally on the levels of Pixar and DreamWorks, and even Blue Sky Studios. The animation for the mothers and the little girl's world is very much really well done, with a lot of colors being used, and even though the character designs are quite typical of what you'd usually expect from a CGI film or any film done in CGI, it's actually really well done. It's actually really well designed and has a good amount of detail. But the standout definitely has to be the stop motion segments in the storytelling moments of the film. Now, these stop motion segments are just very much well done. I'm not only a huge fan of 2D animation, or at times CGI animation or claymation, I'm also a huge fan of stop motion because it's also very interesting to really see how stop motion manages to move, and it really does have a very special feel of texture and a feel of depth to its details. And I really have to say that the animation for both the CGI segments and the storytelling stop motion segments were both well done. It really merges these two worlds together to create a huge feast for the eyes and really leave you with a lot of great visuals and great imagery that's actually quite hard to leave your eyes off the screen. It's filled to the brim with color, with such vivid imagination, and a lot of well done visuals to boot. And then we have the music, which is just totally well done, using a lot of vocals from Camille, who has a very soothing and very elegant voice. And even at times, there's some of the uses of guitar and some of the uses of a lot of very simple and very, very down-to-earth beats. Very much like this film in general. It definitely has a very down-to-earth, very relatable, and very charming feel to this film that is all the more strong and powerful in its own special way. The orchestral pieces also merge well. So, with that said, the music definitely suits the overall childhood charm and innocence, and that feel that you get every time you look back with such fond memories and with such really fond times as well. The orchestral pieces really do merge well with the world of the Little Prince and even the journeys as well, and it's actually really well done. It's really excellent, especially when you have a veteran composer like Hans Zimmer on the helm. He really does a very fine job with a lot of orchestral pieces and a lot of composition. So if you have anything that has Hans Zimmer on there, then you really know for a fact that you know that your film is going to be very much memorable and very much worthy of purchasing the OST. The characters are very much lovable and very interesting, starting off with the little girl. Now, the little girl is rather your typical child prodigy who is very smart, very inquisitive, and very much someone whom a lot of young ladies can relate to. But the sad thing is, she doesn't really have a name, and that kind of makes it sad for me because I kind of went into this film thinking that she would have a name, and especially the mom, but she never did. It's almost like the main protagonist of the Polar Express who didn't have a name, and especially the female protagonist who didn't have a name, and the only kid who had a name was Billy. That was just it. So the little girl is a very fascinating character of her own. She does start off as a very prodigious young lady who is very capable in doing maths and doing a lot of these things as well, and even being very intelligent for her age. But she's still a very young kid, and she still is quite inquisitive. and she still wants to see the world around her, and she still wants to see what life is like beyond the books, beyond all the schedules, beyond all the rigorous training and all that stuff. And that is where the film really does come into fruition with the relationship between her and the old aviator. Pretty much the bread and butter of this film was definitely the young girl's relationship with the old aviator, as if though there is a sort of mentor-student relationship and even a grandfather-granddaughter relationship between the both of them, which makes this film all the more heartwarming and all the more charming, and at times even all the more tear-jerking at times. And then we get to the old aviator. Now, on the outside, you might think he is your crotchety and very much eccentric old man who is quite kooky and kind of weird to a lot of the neighbors, to the point where they think that he has an issue, or they think he's extremely weird, or they basically think he is kind of not all there. And he does get himself into a certain amount of trouble, especially with the police as well, especially with what happened with the wall of the young girl's and the mother's new home, especially when his propeller flew in. Yeah, but despite his initial kookiness, he is shown to be a very wise and very much optimistic, enthusiastic, and very intelligent old man who was once upon a time an aviator who met the little prince and had adventures with him, and even wanted to know more about him and even developed a friendship with him. He is definitely a very fascinating character, and like I said before, his, grandfatherly bond with the little girl is definitely the hugest highlight of the film and really makes the film all the more worthwhile watching. And then we have the mother. Now, the mother is pretty much your typical mom whom a lot of kids could relate to, because they kind of see this mother as, at times, their own mom who naturally loves her children and wants the best for them, but at times she has a completely firm grip on them and almost expects way too much from them, and at times really feels guilty for herself and really feels like she has to carry the burden all the downtime, because she feels like it's always her responsibility to make sure that her own daughter is well-rounded and well-adjusted and constantly dresses well and is well-behaved, and to the point where she has to make sure that she is better than her. And, I have to say that she is quite a fascinating character that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, especially when it comes to our mothers. But there are a couple of things that kind of make me scratch my head as to why she is the way she is. It's implied that she is a single mom, or basically she is a single mom. And it's also implied that she's either split up from her husband, or her own husband passed away after some years ago. Because we only see an evidence in which the little girl does talk about her father, and we even see a snow globe that says the name from Dad on there, as to imply that they were once upon a time married, but something happened and she either divorced him, or he's either estranged, or he's probably dead. We never knew why. We never knew why she is the way she is, and we never knew what happened to the father. We never really got into additional backstory of why her mom has a very tight grip on her own daughter, why she is the way she is. She probably would have benefited the story if she probably would have had a lot more backstory as to why she acts this way, why she is this way to her own daughter, why she wants to really make sure that she really achieves a lot in life, and why she really wants to make sure that her life is well planned and all that stuff. And we don't really understand why, but I think it's very easy to say that this mom is sort of like a representation of how our parents were like when we were young kids and when we were growing up. Always wanting us to do our very best and making sure that they love us, but at times having a very interesting way of loving us, and at times almost bordering to the lines of being, well, nags, so to say. But still, the mom is a very interesting character who has her own quirks, but she probably would have benefited the story with a little bit more character development of why she is the way she is. And even despite that flaw, I could still be very forgiving with it, because she's still a very good character on her own. And then we even get the little prince himself. Now, the little prince has a very, very interesting presence on the screen. He's very wise for his age, yet at the same time, he is quite curious of the world around him, and even how life is when he grows up. He's a very fascinating character, and it's no wonder why a lot of people feel like he's a very iconic character. Even the other characters, like the Rose, the Fox, the businessman, the king, and the conceited gentleman, and the policeman, really do a lot of great stuff to the story and really work well off the characters as well. So overall, the characters have a lot of charming and likable facets about them, especially the little girl, the aviator, and of course, our title hero, the little prince. And then we get to the voice acting. Let me just say that the voice acting is just so well done. Mackenzie Foy really gives off layer after layer of her little girl character, making her all the more fascinating and making her all the more likable and extremely lovable at the same time. Rachel McAdams, who I know her works as Jessica from that god-awful film The Hot Chick, and Regina George from probably one of my most favorite teen movies of all time, Mean Girls, and of course her roles in other mature films like The Notebook alongside Ryan Gosling and Red Eye. You could really tell that she has grown very well as an actress, and with hearing her as the mother, I was rather surprised that it was her. I was expecting another actress because when it came to Rachel McAdams, she was really memorable in a lot of her young lady roles, especially Regina George from Mean Girls. I will always remember Rachel McAdams in this role because I guess she really did embody that role really well. But with seeing her and even hearing her as the mother, she was definitely a very huge joy to listen to. She was able to really give off a lot of layers as the mother, making her a very interesting and very fascinating and quite a really relatable character to a lot of kids everywhere of how they feel about their moms, and especially when you can hear her sufferings, her anguish, her anger. You could really see a lot of layers and a lot of interesting facets about her really coming to life on the screen. With Jeff Bridges as the old aviator, he gives off his very lovable grandpa persona with a hint of with a sagacity that few other actors could ever equal. Then we have Riley Osborne as the little prince, who is able to give such a very fine performance as he gives the little prince a very sagacious and very, very well-tempered manner, making him a very lovable character. With Paul Rudd as Mr. Prince, he does a very fine job with his role, and he does a very fine job with all the nuances and all of the reactions. That's very fun to watch him on screen, especially with the likes of Paul Giamatti as the school teacher, who gives off a very dark persona and really makes him all the more imposing. With Bud Cort as the king, he was able to make him wise and friendly, and even with Ricky Gervais as the conceited man. Now, for those of you who know Ricky Gervais, you'll probably be familiar with him as the boss from the original British version of The Office. he does a very fine job as the conceited man, really being fun to listen to and really peppering his role with fine British humor. And even the likes of Marion Cotillard, who is able to give off a very gorgeous and very elegant portrayal of the Rose, making her very much a very fascinating enigma, especially with James Franco as the Fox. Now, I really like James Franco as an actor as he's quite versatile. Of course, a lot of people like him in a lot of the Seth Rogen comedies, but I also like him for his dramatic roles like Tristan, and even this in particular. He's able to make the Fox a very fascinating enigma and even a crafty character as well. So overall, I have to say that the voice acting found in this film was just excellent. So what more can I say about this film? This was a huge trip for me. It made me smile, it made me cry, and it just tugged at my heartstrings so well that the strengths of this film could easily outweigh the flaws. And even with all the flaws, I have to say, it really is a very great film that I could just easily forgive the flaws and really award this film a well-deserved 5 out of 5. I easily forgive the flaws because you know what? The flaws don't really matter. It's the strengths of this film that really make it stand out for me. It really deserved that perfect score because this film was honest. This film worked with no gimmick whatsoever, and it was true to what it was trying to tell. It did not need to hide anything marketable. It did not need to hide anything that was trendy. It just needed to be honest and true, and I really got that through this film. And the message is, it doesn't matter how old you are, because when you think about it, we're all children at heart, and this film really states its message really well. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in for another review. So until then, good night, everybody.